All right, are we ready for Revelation chapter 6? We're only doing one chapter tonight. Just because it's still a lot of pages. We are getting into the heart of really what's getting ready to start happening. And it is no joke. It is a lot of stuff. And it's a lot of stuff that is outside our realm of understanding as to how something like what we're getting ready to read can actually take place. But it's going to happen. You got to remember, even though we can't really conceptualize it or understand it fully, just because we can't doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And we know that it's going to happen because of everything else that has happened in Scripture, not only from the prophecies of being fulfilled, but what we know historically is true. We can count on the fact that the rest of this is also going to happen. So, next week we will probably do chapters 7 and 8, just because 7 is a little bit of a weird chapter. It kind of is a pause in between 6 and 8. And so it's just weird how they have some of these stacked in there. I'm not sure why they did it that way. But so we're going to start in chapter 6. But let's look at our notes first so we can kind of understand where we're coming from. So remember, last week, Jesus stepped up as the Lamb to take the scroll. Remember, John was brokenhearted that nobody was there really to take the scroll. Nobody was worthy to take the scroll. But Jesus steps up, takes the scroll, and we are curious as to maybe what this scroll really is. Lots of different ideas out there. I believe it's a record of what is getting ready to happen, simply because you're going to see how this plays out in chapter 6. So it kind of lets us see that as he's unrolling this scroll, it's reading out and playing out as to what's going to take place in what's written in this scroll. So here's what we see. The scroll is written on both sides, which is an abnormal thing, by the way. And so some people say that on the outside, the back side of the scroll, what everybody else can see is for everybody else. It's the bad news, the idea of you lose. Because the ones that get to see on the other side of the scroll are going to be in heaven. They're going to be able to see what Jesus is reading as John gets to see what he's reading. And so the inside of the scroll is the private part, and that is for letting us know that we win. So the losers, really chapters 6 through 11. The winners, 14 through 19. And it is going to be crazy what we're going to read the rest of these chapters. The narrative as a whole, they are non-sequential, meaning it's going to bounce around all over the place. So you kind of really got to pay attention how these things are taking place. The kingdom of the world falls in chapter 11, verse 15, with the final overall collapse of the world in chapters 17 and 18. But Armageddon, the big war, happens in chapter 16, with the final battle happening in chapter 19. That really means nothing to you yet because we're not there, but just letting you see that it's going to bounce a little bit. Again, you got to remember, this is John doing the best that he can at possibly the age of 90 is what people believe that he's at, writing this stuff down and trying to remember what he's seeing and conceptualize it and verbalize, here's what we're seeing. And so John's writing unfolds in a pattern, it's bigger picture, and then the details. So what you're going to see is a snapshot of, okay, here's what's going to happen, and then he breaks it down to explain it. So really what you're going to see in chapter 6 is a snapshot, and then he explains it in the chapters that follow. Everybody with me, or have I lost you already? You just ready to get to the scroll, I can see. Christ's prediction in Mark chapter 13, 7 through 24, is also a comparison to this chapter. Let me just read it to you really quick. Just because it's important for you to see that Jesus speaks of these things that are going to take place at some point in time. And the fact that he's speaking of them and now revealing them to John tells us, again, that they will come true. I'm not going to read all of it. But he says, "But when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be troubled, for such things must happen, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and troubles. These are the beginnings of sorrows." So he's talking here and saying, listen, when you start hearing things that are taking place that you can't see or are not there, but you hear of all these other wonderful, magnificent, worldly things happening, just know that that's just the beginning. And when you read these seals, as we read them, you're going to be, again, blown away. So, in both of these, it talks about wars. You're going to hear about wars in chapter 6. There's intercontinental strife in both, meaning there's countries against countries, and that's really what's going to take place a lot here. There's earthquakes in both. There's famine in both. Only in Revelation is there pestilence. Jesus doesn't speak of that for whatever reason, but both of them speak of persecution, and both of them speak of shaking the heavens. Now, as we read through these scrolls, you're going to see "and" a lot. Okay? And is nothing more than building up the anticipation. So have you ever heard somebody tell a story that as they get into the story, they're throwing all these ands in, and every time you hear an and, they ramp up in their excitement and their passion for the story that they're telling. Have you ever been around somebody like that that's just super excited? Come on, you got to help me out here. Yes, that's what's happening here. So as we're reading these scrolls, through the scroll and the seals, you need to picture the excitement of John as he's reading these things and seeing these things. He's just becoming more anxious and excited about what he's seeing. Maybe not in a good way, but it's just like, you've got to be kidding me. And that, and then that, and then that. That's the idea of what we're going to be reading. So let's read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 6, and then we'll start explaining these seals. So again, Jesus has been handed the scroll, and now he is going to begin opening these seals, opening the scroll, and reading what is coming from it. Here's John. Now, I saw when the Lamb, again, this is Jesus, opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a loud voice like thunder, "Come and see." Now, remember the creatures that we talked about? One was like a lion, shape of a human, I think an eagle, and what was the fourth one? Anybody remember? No, it wasn't a snake. I don't remember. Anyway, one of them, we don't know which one, it doesn't even matter which one, but one of them speaks loudly, thunderously, confidently, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out conquering and to conquer. Now, right off the bat, who do you think that is? Honestly, without looking at the notes, who do you think it is? Who does it sound like? Sitting on a white horse, coming to conquer with a crown on his head and a bow. Sounds like Jesus. Who's holding the scroll? Jesus. He's not the one that John is seeing. This is somebody different. This, in fact, is going to be the Antichrist. So, let's get the notes. One of the creatures, again, thunderous voice, just means authoritative to get your attention. The white horse. Anytime a leader, king, warrior rode a white horse, it was for conquest or to signify victory or to signify peace. And so this individual, which we will see in a little bit, that's going to be the Antichrist, he's riding in bringing peace. Okay? Now that sounds weird because we know the Antichrist is a bad guy. He's the guy that's going to deceive the entire world. Not the first 3.5 years. You got to understand, the first 3.5 years, this guy's coming in, and he's going to persuade everybody that he is a good guy. And he's going to do spectacular things that win them over, and everybody's going to be on board with following him. He's going to be like Christ. He's going to do some spectacular things, and people are just going to fall in love with him. So we see him, this is him coming into the scene of the tribulation at the beginning, bringing peace, and people are just going to fall all over him. Does that make sense? It talks about he who sat. It's the triumph of militarism in the tribulation. So there's 2 different characters in the tribulation. You've got Christ and you've got the Antichrist. We know that Christ gets a real crown. His crown is actually the Greek word for a diadema. It's different. It's ornate and royal crown, and he carries a sword. The Antichrist, every time you see crown associated here, it's going to be Stephanos, the leafy crown, a second-rate crown, a cheaper version crown. And so that's what's being here in verse 2 when you see that he's wearing a crown. It's Stephanos. I'll pause in a little bit. It's a perishable and temporary crown. And then he has a bow, but notice that they do not mention arrows. Having a bow with no arrows signifies that he comes in peace. He's not there for war. He is there to help, to come alongside. But it's enough that he is going to dupe those who are left, and again, as we get further into this, most of who is left will be Jewish people and Middle Eastern people. So, I am confident, we believe, all the guys that I study after, this is the Antichrist. Remember, Jesus is the one opening and reading the scroll, so he's not the one coming in this fashion. He doesn't enter until chapter 19. You've got the other three horsemen that bring catastrophes. We're going to read three other horsemen in just a few moments, and they're bringing bad stuff, so it only fits that this guy is a part of all the bad stuff. This is believed to be the beginning of the tribulation, with the end happening in chapter 19 when Christ comes. He brings peace by uniting Jews and Gentiles. He's bringing everybody that's left together. And he brings protection for them for 3.5 years. Again, this speaks back to Daniel's idea that the tribulation is 7 years with a middle marker of 3.5 years of decent, and then 3.5 years of really, 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 really bad. And so 3.5 years, and then he turns his back on him. He becomes very powerful after the rapture. Again, this is arguments for those that like to think that this is a pre-trib taking of the church. Because think about this. The church is taken away. All of us are gone. Well, those of us that follow God, right? What's the world going to react to that? They're going to know something's up. We're talking of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people that just disappear off the face of the planet with no explanation, with nothing left behind to explain except for Scripture and those that kind of know the truth. And so this guy, in the middle of all this chaos, is going to ride in and just, I've got you. It's okay. Look what I can do for you. He's going to win them over. So you see how this can work. It makes total sense. Now, what we need to understand is that this man has two different phrases that are associated with him. One is man of lawlessness, which you can find in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. And the abomination of desolation, which is referred to by Jesus in Matthew 24 and also by Daniel in his book. So this guy is no good. The things that he's going to do in the future, especially with the temple and with the altars, he's just no bueno. The bow represents peace without the arrows. He comes under the guise of peace. He is an imposter. He's a fake. With the chaos after the rapture, peace will be sought for, and he will provide it. He brings peace to a chaotic and unpeaceful area. Now, the question is, who is this guy, right? Everybody wants to know, who is this guy? Nobody knows. But here's what they believe to be true. It's believed that this will most likely be a geopolitical person who wants to gain the trust of Israel. In other words, a very powerful political figure. Could be one of our presidents. It could be a Middle Eastern guy. It could be somebody that just has a lot of money and a lot of clout like Bill Gates. Could be any of those people. All we know is it's somebody that's going to have an effect on the entire world that is there. He's going to gain the trust of Israel, those who remain after the rapture and are looking for the Messiah. He will set himself up in the temple as God, but after 3.5 years, he will blaspheme God to set the stage for ultimate betrayal. This also will fulfill Daniel's dividing the Great Tribulation in half. This guy's a mastermind. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he will win the world over, treat them really great for 3.5 years, and then once he's got them, he will turn his back on them and just destroy them. Sounds like a fantastic guy, right? All right, any questions on verses 1 and 2? Any thoughts, questions? I know that was a lot, and that's just the first seal. Yeah?
So I'm pretty sure you mentioned it several times. So you think that we won't be around for those 7 years, even the 3 years?
That is an assumption from my standpoint of how I read Scripture. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be here for this. Now, doesn't mean we may not see him. We may see that, okay, this is the guy gaining power. He's gaining some control. He's gaining some things. I do not believe 90% that we won't be here. There's a 10% of me that says we might be here through that first 3.5 years. We may have to experience a little bit. But in just a minute, you're going to see that even that may not happen because of some destruction that happens that is probably going to be us. Daniel? The Antichrist? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yes, ma'am. Pierce? I believe so, yes, absolutely. Yep. The question was, is the Antichrist a human? And yes. Yep. It's not going to be a robot or the computer and AI. It's not going to be anything like that. It'll be a person. All right, verse 3 through 6. Yeah, that's a typo. It should be 3 and 4. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. Sounds fantastic, right? Red horse signifies war for sure. And we know in Matthew chapter 7 how it talks about that. The color of terror and bloodshed. We know that that's what that looks like. And the rider was given a great sword by God, which it could be a physical sword. We know that Jesus is going to wipe people out just by the sword of his lips, by his words. Could be just a power of words, or it could be literal sword. We're not quite sure, but you got to think about this guy is using his opportunity to sway people in one direction or another. So he's killing them with his words. He's spreading deceit, spreading lies, causing countries to go against country. Most likely the false prophet that is entered into this arena that's going to work alongside the Antichrist to just disrupt the harmony that may be trying to be experienced at this point in time. And so they're just going to kill each other. They're just going to go against each other. It's crazy. Third seal, verse 5 and 6. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Scales like the good and bad scale, like you see for judgment. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." Now for us, that means absolutely nothing. We don't deal with denarius. We don't really deal with oil and wine a lot. But in this culture, it means a whole lot. So let's start with the black horse. It signifies famine. Not a good thing. It's an economic collapse, destruction. So whoever's left on the world, whether it's the United States and everybody else, or we're gone and it's just the Middle East, doesn't matter. What's going to happen is there's going to be a massive economic collapse. Now, many people would say that the first 2 seals may have already been opened. And now we're into the third seal because our economy is struggling. Here's what I say. We're not even close. I don't think anything's been opened yet, because when they open, you're going to know it. It is going to be so extreme and beyond our comprehension of how anything could be happening like this that you'll know. You're going to know. So anyway, that's just my personal opinion on that one. But there's going to be an economic collapse. It's going to be for destruction, but it's probably going to be for a short time. I think there was something, let me think real quick. There was something in there that I don't remember what it was that signified that they believed it was just for a short time. But it's only going to affect the crops of wheat and barley, not the olive trees or the vineyards. How they know that, I'm not sure, except for the fact that it says barley's going to be really expensive. Well, why do things get expensive? It's because you can't get it. So therefore the cost is driven up. And so most likely it's going to be some type of damage to the crop of these things to where we cannot buy as readily as we would like the oats, the barley, the grains. But the wine's going to be okay because the vineyards are not going to be touched during this economic collapse. Others believe it will only hurt the lower and middle class while the rich will survive. In fact, if you go back in here, a lot of it says it's going to take a day's wage to buy just a meal. In fact, if you'll notice there, it's going to be potentially, they believe, $200 just for a loaf of bread. Loaf of bread now you can usually get anywhere from $3 or less, unless you get the super expensive organic crap that nobody likes to eat, right? This is not going to be that. We're talking about probably just a regular small loaf of bread. It's going to take you a day's wage to buy it. One meal to be able to eat. So when they say there's an economic collapse, it's going to affect those that work hard to make ends meet. Those that have money at the yin-yang like Mr. Beast, He's not going to have any issue, most likely, because he's got money. He's got clout. He's got power. He can do whatever he wants. We're going to have our time if we're here. Most of us don't have everything that well, that's probably a stretch. We live within our means for the most part, right? We get a little outside of that. But a lot of people, they don't worry about that. So when it talks about the oil and wine, it's actually referring to the wealthy. They're not going to be touched. They're going to be okay. Any thoughts on the second and the third seal? Not gotten into the good stuff yet, so just hang on to it. Yeah, Daniel.
So that means that at that time, the one world economy is not kicking yet?
It could be that it is, and that's partly why the collapse is happening. It could be the onset of that, for sure. Yep. Good question. The question was, is that the one world economy, the one world order? Could very well be. Everybody good? Am I going too fast? It's all right? Evie, you all right? Too slow? Seal 4. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death. And Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger and death, and by the beasts of the earth. Now it's real. You know, famines are one thing. Famines happen all the time. There's famines happening right now all over the earth. There are people that are doing without food. We get that. What you're seeing in this one is unlike anything you have ever seen in your entire life. I can promise you. So when we talk about a pale horse, it's talking about a greenish horse in color. Like, you know how chloroform is green in color? That's where we get this, the chloris. And so it's greenish like a dead corpse. We've seen movies where they kind of look like the zombies. They look kind of green. That's what this is looking like. But what is happening is there's going to be the death of many unbelievers. Again, if the church is raptured, has nothing to do with us. So this is just death and destruction of a lot of people outside believers. There's 4 weapons that are mentioned. We've got the sword, which is going to represent war. You've got famine, which we know is going to happen. You've got the potential of plagues or sickness, death. And then you've got wild beasts. Now, again, you got to think about this. There's an economic collapse. There's not a lot of grain out there, which, what do animals eat? They eat a lot of grain. So if the grain is gone, they have no way to eat, which they're going to turn and they're going to eat people. They got to eat somehow. They got to get their nutrition from something, and we're kind of meaty. And so they're going to eat people. So because of the lack of food source, they're going to become angry. They're going to come after us. It also could insinuate that it's more military and political in nature. The Greek word therion appears 38 times all through this book, through this prophecy, and it represents the coming of the Antichrist and the henchmen. Again, they're going to use some authority to come through with their power. Could also represent pandemics. So it may not be just wild animals. It could be some type of pandemic that's coming through. I am a firm believer that what we just experienced was a test run, just to see how the world's going to react. Can't prove that, just a gut. Makes sense to me. But here's what gets me the most, okay? Notice in here that it says, over a fourth of the earth is going to be destroyed. People. So to put it in context, that is about 1.5 to 2 billion people that are going to die by death and destruction in one form or the other. Now, that may not make big for you, so let me help you with that. In World War I, the amount of men and women and children that died was 10 million. World War II was 20 million, and then on top of that, 6 million Jews. The Revelation says, when this seal is popped, when this fourth horseman comes through, when death rides through, 1/4 or more of the population that is left will die. Billions of people. So for me, when I think about that, and we're going to read even more of how maybe that might happen, that tells me that what's going to take place at the end portion of this prophecy is with a small group of people. 3/4 of the remainder of the people of earth. Now, if the church has left, that's millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people. And then you take out another 1 million or 1.5 billion to 2 billion people. There's not a lot left. That's a small amount of people left. Makes me wonder, where are we going to be? If the church isn't taken, will we be a part of that 1.5 million, 2 billion people?
So what happens to new believers after the rapture?
It's a great question, and as much as I want to answer that now, we will get into that, I promise. So if you can hold on to that question. Question was, what happens to people who, after the rapture, give their heart and life to Christ? It's a great question, and I promise I will answer that, okay? You want the skinny of it? Actually, hold that. If I have time at the end, I'll answer that. All right, so everybody good? Everybody terrified now? You should be. I mean, this is real stuff. Maybe not terrified, that's a little strong. Verse 9, when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar, so now we've gone away from the earthly visions, now we're back up into heaven, okay? When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed. So, lots to talk about here. So, first thing you need to understand is back at the altar in the Old Testament, the blood would be spilt over as a sacrifice and as an attitude of prayer to God to avenge the sins and to take care of forgiveness. So in this instance, the altar in heaven, there are the souls of those who have been martyred, killed for their faith. Many would like to argue that it could be the martyrs of Scripture and the martyrs of old. Many would argue that it's the martyrs of those during the tribulation that, Brian, give their heart and life to God and are killed in that moment. They are taken and put here. What we do know and what we do see is that those souls that are in heaven are pleading for mercy and for retribution of those who have taken their lives. Makes sense to me, right? But what's cool is they are under the throne, which signifies what? Protection. That they are seen, that they are heard, and that they are saved. Saved as in they are taken care of. So these martyred saints cry out for vindication. These are people who die for the gospel and testimony of their lives during the tribulation for not worshiping the beast, as well as, I believe, the martyrs of old. After the rapture, people will still be able to be saved, Brian. But Jesus hasn't returned yet, so that's part of the reason why there's still time. There will always be time for that. However, it's going to be really difficult. Why? If the church is gone, where are they going to go? Who's going to tell them? How are they going to get the Scripture? How are they going to understand? And then you have to ask the question, if the church is gone, is the Spirit gone? I would argue no, he is not. He is not left yet. The Spirit will remain, in my opinion. So there's still a moving, a pleading with people's lives, and when they give their heart and life to God in that moment, they will most likely be killed for their faith. And so those souls will be under the throne. It's the blood of the sacrifice will be poured out under or on the side of the altar. Again, you can go back in Exodus 29 and Leviticus 4 to see that. So that is what these souls represent in that moment. And they're given white robes. These white robes indicate salvation, that they are protected, that they are safe. It also indicates their righteousness. Remember, it's purity and victory. And the question is, what kind of body do they have? If these souls are underneath the throne, that's kind of weird. Does that mean they're kind of squished up? And how many are there? Like, are there thousands? Are there 4? Are there millions? Like, what does this look like? Or are they little spirits just kind of on a ball, just rolling? We don't know what that looks like. All John can tell us is, I know that they are there under the throne, and I hear them and I see them. So It could be an intermediate body. It could be a temporary body suited for heaven until their soul reunites with their earthly body. Again, a lot of that we don't understand yet. It's still kind of out there, but we'll talk about that later on. And it also can be an insight as to what happens to believers after death, that believers are actually conscious, at rest, and aware of the future judgment. It could insinuate very much that as soon as you die, because we know that to be absent of the body is to be present with the Lord, Paul tells us. It could be that even though your body is in the ground, you're not there, right? That your soul is in heaven waiting to reunite with your body to be in eternity with God forever. Again, weird stuff, way different, not normal conversation that you have with your friends. But it is a part of what's happening. I have a theory, have a guess as to what happens when we die. Even though it may seem like thousands of years that we may be dead, I believe it is an instant that the end of the time comes together. Because outside of this life, we will not exist in time as we understand it. And so it will be as if you fall asleep and wake up. When you sleep at night, you sleep for 7, 8, 10 hours, 12 hours, some of you, right? You don't know what went on. All you know is you went to sleep and you woke up. To me, that is what death will be like for believers. You will die and you will wake instantly in the presence of God, waiting to return to your heavenly or your earthly body that will be changed forever. Again, that's extra. So any thoughts on that seal? That's an interesting one. Yes, sir. Great. Yep. Sure. That would be my guess. Yes. Yes. Anybody else? Yeah. No, 4 different people. 4 different representations. Now you got to remember you asked me last week, are these symbolic or are these real, right? So symbolic. All 4 of these are symbolic of something that's going to happen and take place. They are representing something. Like the first one represents somebody coming in bringing peace. It represents the Antichrist. It's not really him, but it represents him coming in. Death and destruction. Don't know what that's going to look like, but it's going to happen. Does that make sense? Anybody else? Good questions. Anybody confused? Lost? Tim, you all right? Mm-hmm.
Is it really going to be that many people, or is it going to be just a few because we don't really get it and we're not really following Christ? You know what I mean? Like, is that the gate that the same kind of reference where the rapture is going to be us that are truly following God and only maybe a few?
Correct.
You know what I mean?
I think there's going to be a lot of people that are left behind that are shocked, that are saddened, which tells me that it helps me understand that those that are left behind will have some type of working understanding of what they missed. And it's either going to drive them to him or drive them away from him. And most likely it's going to drive them away, just based on how this reads later on. Anybody else? Everybody good? All right, let's read this last one. Verse 12, I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. Remember John, not the biggest vocabulary, right? Trying to explain things as to what he's seeing. He's doing the best that he can. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. I love how he describes that. So take a fig tree, you're shaking it like the wind, and so these things aren't falling straight down, right? Because if they just fell off, they would, but because they're being shaken, they're going to be thrown all over the place. So these stars that he's seeing falling from the heavens are falling towards the earth all over the place. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Woo! So again, this is letting us see what's coming. A lot of people could say that this is kind of the end of the end, the Armageddon. Things are happening. The only people that are here are the military leaders, and they're battling, and now they see the clouds roll back. They see Christ coming, and they're like, kill us now, because we see what's happening. So, lots of interesting things here. There's 6 great catastrophes that are happening, and these are universal, meaning they're going to happen everywhere. It's not going to be just a centrally located place. Earthquakes, volcanic explosions, most likely meteor showers or asteroids falling, and tsunamis. That's what's going to be happening. When you read that the stars are falling, it's talking about most likely meteor showers or asteroids hitting the earth. And we're not talking about a couple. We're not talking about the random ones that just happen to come into our atmosphere. We're talking about literally just dropping out of the sky constantly. He gives us the example. When you shake a fig tree, all these just start falling, right? Not just one, not just two, not just a handful. We're talking about a ton, a lot. And so he's using that example to help us understand that what we're going to see, these asteroids falling, they're going to fall. And they're going to cause some serious, serious damage. Yep. It's a great question. So can we pause that one? Because that's a really good question. Any other? He asked when it talks about these military leaders and the power people going into these caves, could it be that they're going into bomb shelters from a nuclear blast? And so when I read that that the mountain and the island was moved out of its place, that's exactly what I see. I see a massive nuclear bomb falling and dropping and just decimating a lot of stuff, which could be why they're going to the caves saying, okay, the end is near, it's over and it's time. Yes, sir. The earth would not explode because meteors have hit the earth before. It will make a massive crater, lots of dust, and can cause a lot of health issues for the people around them. The earth's pretty big, and yeah, it's going to put a whooping on it pretty good, but not enough to where it's destroyed. And it could be that he's seeing these fall out of the sky. What else falls through the sky and causes damage? Did you say birds? Think more destructive. Missiles all over with nuclear warheads. So they're falling out of the sky. What's the best way John can describe missiles? He's never seen a missile before. And so it's very plausible to say that it may not be meteors and asteroids. It rarely could be missiles flying through the air, hitting the earth, coming from all over the place, leaving massive destruction, causing massive earthquakes, causing the volcanic eruptions. All of these things can be taking place. It was cute to me during the onset of COVID how everybody saw all the earthquakes all over the world and said, oh, it's happening. Earthquakes happen all the time. It's happening all the time. This is different, and it's going to be different, and you're going to know that it's different. So some talk about the change in the moon, and we hear the blood moon talk about a lot, and we do have blood moons. But it's going to look like it's covered in blood by the color of the reflection that it has. Even now, we have scientists and astronomers talking about how the moon is rusting in its look. What we do know, what's going to happen is total chaos. I mean, think about it. Whether it's meteors, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or nuclear bombs and missiles falling all over the place, this is not a pleasant spot to be in. This is chaos at its best. It's the reason why we should be paying attention to North Korea and to Pakistan, to the Middle East, to China, with all of these weapons that they have, guys, I'm telling you, I'm not trying to scare you, just being real and honest with you, that is most likely how a lot of this is going to start. So, there you go. Merry Christmas to you. So, this last seal to me is either a cosmic phenomenon or nuclear fallout. It's one or the other, or maybe both. I don't know. I'm not interested in sticking around to find out because it does not sound fun or very enjoyable. But notice what it says, that even these leaders, even these sinful people that are left, they recognize this is him. It's capitalized. They recognize that God is coming. Jesus, him, he is now on his way. And they call it the great day of the Lord. Amos 5:18 calls it the day of darkness, which again, we see the sun goes down. It goes black as a sackcloth of hair. That's just disgusting to me. Isaiah 2:19 and 21 says that the earth is going to tremble. Again, all prophecies. 24:1, the earth is empty and a wasteland. Again, think about the fact that it's called, or said that it's empty and it's called a wasteland. What do you think a nuclear fallout's going to be like? It's going to be a wasteland. Even if it's not nuclear, if it's just a bunch of missiles, everything's going to be destroyed. Even if it's not missiles or nuclear, it's just a bunch of meteorites, it's going to be a wasteland. So, we have a nice little earth filled with 8 billion people. The church leaves, potentially. Even if it doesn't leave, a fourth of the population will be destroyed. Sicknesses and all kinds of craziness. The Antichrist is here bringing peace to a otherwise crazy scenario. And then all hell breaks loose with meteorites and missiles and who knows what else. The world is in disarray. All because the great day of the Lord is coming. Yes, sir. So when I say the church, I mean the people representing the church. The buildings aren't going anywhere because it's just a building. That would be interesting, though. So all of this is going to happen, finally forcing people to acknowledge the greatness of God, but not enough to cause them to turn to him. Notice what they say. He's coming. We're kind of in bad shape. Not we submit, we turn our life over. None of that. Many of the wealthy and powerful leaders beg for the rocks to fall and hide them. In reality, there's no way to run and hide. And this is a preview of what is to come with the trumpets and the bowls. This isn't even the bad stuff yet, by the way. There's trumpets and bowls that signify certain things that are going to take place. This is mild. We read this and we're like, oh, this is terrible, this is tragic. This is nothing. Nothing. Yes, sir. Yes, that's exactly what I said. Yes. And so there's a lot going on here. These 4 horsemen are intertwined. They're all part of it. And so there's 5 things that we can see here. You ready? Here we go. Sin is repugnant to God. Do you know why he's doing this? Because he hates sin that much. It's not that he hates the people. He loves the people. How do we know that? He sent Jesus. That's how we know that he loves all people. But he hates sin. He's always hated sin. He doesn't want anything to do with sin. It's the reason that he came, is to eradicate sin. Secondly, there is terrible intensity in this tribulation. This is just a small portion of it. God is concerned with injustices. Notice what it says about those that are under the throne. Just be patient. Just be patient. Here's a robe to tide you over. Here's a gift. Just be patient. Humans left to themselves will never repent. There's nothing here helping these people, and we see that they are not turning their lives over to God. And then sinful people instinctively hide from God. How do we know that? Because that is exactly what we do when we know we've goofed up. We stop coming to church. We stop hanging out with our Christian friends. We stop going to the Bible. We stop praying. We stop thinking religious things. Why? Because there's sin in our life. You can call it what you want. You can rationalize it. You can dance around it. But the reality is, if you want nothing to do with church, there's a sin issue. Just is. Like it or not. Yeah.
So back to being the first 3.5 years. You honestly think like it'll be like so you know how there's destruction like there's never been?
Yep.
Will it be like a peace that has never been? Like will it actually?
So my understanding is that there's going to be a lot of junk that takes place. Most likely the rapture that causes a lot of unrest. Either way, we can look at our own world, whether we're taken out or not, we can see the unrest that's building. Okay? So that first 3.5 years is the Antichrist will come on the scene, whether after the church or whether we're still here, and persuade people that he is the one that will bring peace to the entire world, which is what everybody wants, world peace. The world will never have peace. As long as the enemy, Satan, is here, the world will never be peace until Christ comes and establishes his worldly throne. Okay? So the Antichrist is coming because he knows that's what everybody knows and is waiting for, so he's going to come and try to establish that. But he's a fake and imposter. So for that first 3.5 years, he does a great job of winning them over, but then he absolutely flips sides and goes after them. Yep. Any other questions? Yeah, Willie. Oh. Okay. So one of the ways that to answer the question of how do we know that the first seal hasn't happened or these others haven't taken place, in the way that it is written in a way that it's going to happen in rapid succession. And so the fact that these other things haven't taken place, that we don't have the Antichrist on the scene yet, that we know of in this fashion of him bringing peace, then to me it's plausible or more plausible to say that it hasn't happened yet than it is to say that it is happened. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the way that I would answer the question of why do I believe God has not allowed the rapture to take place yet is I think one of, let's see if I can find the verse. Of course I can't find it. There's a verse in either 1 Peter or 2 Peter, and I can't recall what it is, but it talks about how God is not slack concerning his promises as some men count slackness. And so the reason I am confident that the rapture hasn't taken place yet is because God is so patient and kind and generous in giving people more opportunities than we deserve to straighten our lives out, to come to him, and he is just being as patient as he possibly can be. And that does not make sense to us because if it were me, I would have had it a long time ago. But he wants all to come to repentance, and he is willing to go as long as he possibly can to make sure that everybody has the proper opportunity to experience his saving grace. Thank you. I knew it was somewhere. Yeah, the Lord is not slack concerning his promises, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So that's how I would answer that question. Anybody else? Yep.
So you're saying that it's not like a set time and it's coming that he can adjust it?
I'm saying only God knows when he is coming back, and it is his call. But I believe he has a set time. But again, we're trying to quantify an unquantifiable thing, meaning you're trying to put God in a box to say he has a time limit, that God does not operate in time. God is the beginning and the end, the Alpha, the Omega, the first and the last, meaning that he was before time existed and after time existed and is in between all the things that are happening all at once. He can be at the time of Hitler and at the time of the Antichrist all at the same time because he doesn't exist in time that way. So for us to say, does he have a time limit? In our mind, yes. In God's mind, no, he's just going to come when he's daggone good and ready. Yeah.
I was just going to say something cool that we learned at IF last
You're really
year.
pretty.
All the Bible translators have decided to stop. I don't know if they were competing, but their efforts were separated. They've all come together and they've we'll have all languages translated, the Bible translated into all languages in 15 years.
So that's when the tribulation will start.
Which is something cool.
Right, because people always ask, well, how is everybody going to hear the gospel? How is everybody going to know? And so there are Bible translators right now legitimately trying to figure out how to translate the Bible in every possible language. And like Sally said, they competed for years, and now they're combining forces, which makes sense. Like you're competing for the same thing. That's dumb. And it is supposed that in about 15 years, every known language will have a copy of Scripture to it. Any other questions? Alyssa, you got a question? Okay. Miss Brandy does? Evie, do you have a question?
I know, like, in science last year, like, we learned about how stars have, like, a life cycle, where eventually they will
Just burn out.
either implode or explode or something.
Yeah.
And die. So is that, like, what it's talking about, you think, at the end? More than, like, the sun, like, changing colors, you think it'll be, like, the sun is, like, dying off?
It could very well be, Evie. It could be that the sun is just going to burn out. I mean, there's a lot of people that believe that the sun's going to burn out. It could be that. And it could be, again, when we talk about stars, I don't think it's the literal stars. I think it's just going to be meteorites that are falling. But what is John? John doesn't know about meteorites, but he knows stars. So anything coming from the sky that glows and is hot, he's just going to assume maybe that it's a star. Good question. Yes? That's what scientists say, that's for sure. Yep. Anybody else? Yep. Oh, you did have a question. Oh. I'm repeating, usually when I give an answer, I'm repeating the question. So if they'll go back and watch, they'll get a glimpse. I'm not going to recite the question because sometimes I don't remember the entire question. Yep. Yep. So the question is, does all this bad stuff happen in 3.5 years? Again, chapter 6 is kind of a prequel to all of it. John gives us all, and then we're going to go back and piece it out to see really kind of what it looks like as well. So yes and no. Yes and no. Yes.
So I heard like so since like the rapture already happened, I heard like something about like you'll have to pay your own blood. Is that basically what dying is?
First off, did you say because the rapture has happened?
Yeah, because like you know how like now we can like come to God and rapture and be saved, but now like you have to like die because like the rapture already happened.
Gotcha. So the rapture has not happened. Okay, sorry. I got you. I thought you meant like now. So you're talking about in the tribulation. Okay, you gotta specify, man. Yeah, I know. I'm like, dude, you missed it. So no, in the tribulation, in that 3.5 year period, yes. If the rapture is gone, the way that people will pay with their blood, meaning what? They would have to give their life. They would have to give their life. Yes. Yeah, because what's going to happen, it's not that they have to give their life. That's what's going to take their life, because they're going to stay in the position of, I'm going to serve God, and the Antichrist is in the last 3.5 years is like, no, you're not. If you don't, then you die. So in essence, they give their life, but it's not because they want to. It's because if they want to stay in tune with God, that's what is required. Yep, yes.
In Matthew 24:29, it says that the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give light. So is that like literal?
So if the question is in Matthew 24 that the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give light. So you got to remember, the moon is nothing more than a reflection of the sun. So if the sun is darkened, then there is no way that the moon can give any kind of reflective light. So yes, I believe it will be darkened. But think about this. Nuclear bomb hits, what happens? Massive cloud, right? And we're not talking about just one massive nuclear bomb. We're talking about multiple bombs. So it's plausible, that it's not necessarily that the sun is darkened, but that the cloud that is created from these bombs and destruction is so powerful and dark that it just cuts everything off. Have you ever watched, what's the movie? Dante's Peak? Anybody ever seen? I know, I just dated ourselves, sorry. So Dante's Peak is about a volcano, and when the volcano erupts, it erupts all this ash. Well, it goes from a very sunny day to an absolutely dark day because of the cloud of ash that is happening. So if we've got volcanoes and earthquakes and bombs dropping and stars dropping and all of this stuff happening, we're not going to see anything. It could be that the sun is dark because there's a cloud covering it. So good question. Eli? Good question. The question is, how long is the 3.5 years? Many people would ask, is that meaning a year is 1,000 years or what? And it is, we're pretty confident that it is exactly 3.5 years. It is literal. Only because of what Daniel teaches and the days that are given add up to be the 3.5 years. In fact, we'll see some of those times, actually the numbers in these passages as well. So yeah, it is legitimately 3.5 years, yeah.
Okay, so then going off of that, so from the breaking of the first seal to the breaking of the sixth seal, that's supposed to be 7 years?
It could be, yes. Yeah. There's not a lot of differentiating between what's really happening here, which is why a lot of people say that chapter 6 is nothing more than a long or a quick explanation of what's going to happen totally, and then we go back and kind of divide it up as well. Or it could be that this is just the first 3.5 years. I'm not necessarily there, but the further we get into it, the more sense it will make.
So we know for sure that this is supposed to happen very quickly.
Yep. Yes. Within 3.5 to 7 years, all of this is taking place. Yep.
All right, so I see like you're preaching on the ash pool, right? But like, are you yourself, like, are you like concerned a little bit, like, just even a little bit
About what?
about like the whole, like, how's it gonna play out?
Am I concerned about how all of it's going to play out? Of being in the tribulation? 100%. I'm not interested in that. Yeah. I've often joked that if we're in that quarter of the population that's going to get destroyed or nuclear bombs are coming here, I am loading up the church bus and we're going to drive right to the site because I don't want any nuclear fallout. I just want to be bombed and go on. So got 57 seats. So we'll cram everybody in. We'll just take a road trip. So yes and no, honestly. Yeah, I think for me, I worry more about my kids and my grandkids than anything else. I couldn't care less, honestly, because I know where I'm at in my life and where I'm going. I'm not sure that it's going to be that easy later on. I think what Eli and Ethan and Emma will have to deal with, what you guys will have to deal with, what your kids will have to deal with, is going to be far more difficult decisions than what I've ever had to face. And so that is what I worry about more than anything. I don't worry about any of this because I know my God. Like, this is just one book. I've read the other 65, and I see the faithfulness and the power that he possesses, and I also know what he's able to do here. So for 3.5 years, am I going to worry? No, because I know what's going to come after that, if that makes sense. That's kind of a preachery answer, but it really is where I'm at, what I believe. Anybody else? Good questions. Yes, ma'am.
So, how do we know that those, like, specific, you said, like, the people, so, sorry.
It's okay. You're okay.
So with the 4 horsemen,
Yeah.
so you said the horses are probably, like, not real, but the people would be. So how do we know that they're not real if it, like, goes into the detail to, like, describe what they look like? Is he just, like, giving that, just kind of to show what the riders would be like, or what?
So it's a little bit of an assumption, Evie, because we haven't been here yet. And we're working off a 90-year-old's interpretation of a vision that he's seeing, and he's trying his best to explain to us this is what we're seeing. So the idea of, are the 4 horses real? Are the people real? Are they symbolic? We don't know. We really don't know. But the idea carries is not about whether it's real or not, is what are they bringing? What are they representing? Yeah. Yes, Emma. Thanks, Emma. I appreciate that. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you. Anybody else? All right, chapters 7 and 8 next week. We'll try to get through those as best we can. 7, like I said, there's not a whole lot there, maybe in verses 9 through 17. But chapter 8 is a good one. It starts the trumpets with that 7th seal, which is really when everything breaks loose. So let me pray for you, and then I'll kick you out. God, you're good. Thanks for an opportunity to open your word. God, that's a lot of information really fast. And Lord, it really is confusing in some instances because it really doesn't make sense to us. Lord, for us to try to guesstimate and figure out whether the horses are real or the people are real or what does it look like for the 3.5 years or the 7 years or whether we're going to be here or not or what does it look like for the stars. God, those are good things to consider and to think about. But the reality is that's not really what it's about. This is about you and your being fed up with sin and finally bringing judgment to a world ruled by an evil source, saving your people from the destruction. And so help us to keep in mind what this revelation is really about and not to get too caught up with the details, but to see the victory in the end. We love you.